Hello and welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to find their way into the creative industries. I'm joined this week by Amelia, Sciandra. How's it going?
I'm struggling already, right off the bat.
That's a full-on meltdown. I'm gonna
do you know why I couldn't tell you how I was doing? I couldn't tell you how I was doing because the whole time you were talking, I was trying to come up with something really clever and like soundscapey. Like I was gonna be like, shh. And be
That's
like,
so
wow,
cool.
Thank you, Dan, because I actually just came from the land of sound.
Wow. Which is convenient, Amelia, because we happen to be talking to a sound recordist today.
Wow, I
About
didn't even know
blooming
it.
time, as they say. No, this week we're going to be speaking to Zak Ferguson, which is really cool. Zak I've actually worked with on several films. One film that I directed, and another film that I was the editor on, which is the Winnie the Pooh horror film, and the sequel, to be clear. And yes, and he's very kindly agreed to come and share some of his wisdom and experience working on lots of different features, TV shows, corporate stuff. He's really great. I genuinely have like zero issues with his sound ever, which is amazing.
I'm so
there's
excited
always
to speak
things
to him.
that crop up, like, oh, this is an issue and this is not, but not with Zak. So that's my promo for him.
Fantastic.
But hopefully we can peel back some of the mysticism, and for you guys that are like either love sound or like what on earth is sound in the world of filmmaking, then this is your chance to learn everything.
I can't wait.
Well, without any further ado, welcome to the podcast. Zak, how's it going?
Not bad, not bad. We are live. How are we doing? How are we doing, everyone?
Here we are.
Very good.
Where
Here
are
we
you
are.
podcasting in from, Zak? Tell us where we're chatting to you from. Where do you live?
I am podcasting from a small village outside Tunbridge Wells in Kent, in the southeast of England.
Nice.
Very
Lovely.
nice.
But yeah, almost. I often describe it as a hot fuzz-sized village because it really is that small, and it does give a good picture of the scale of the area.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
I was in the town or the village where they filmed Hot Fuzz once, and I didn't know until my friend was like, oh, by the way, did you know they filmed Hot Fuzz here? And then the moment he said it, literally like the whole town, you're like, oh, that's that bit. Oh, that's that bit. Like you're literally just driving around, not a very big area.
It's Wells, isn't it? Or somewhere near?
Yeah. Yeah. I believe so, yeah. Is it? Yeah. 100%. And it's got like that old sort of castle-y bit, or it's more of like a cathedral or church, I think. Where they have the fate and that guy falls from the tower.
Yeah.
But it was very cool. Sadly, there was no sort of slashing of prices shop storefront, which obviously was made up for the film. But Zak, you are a sound recordist, which is so cool. I was saying to you literally moments ago before we went live that we've been really keen and excited to talk to someone that works specifically in sound recording. I think we have chatted to a sound designer or two, maybe a couple of composers, but sound recording is sort of this elusive thing that students that come in when they study at summer camp, for instance, that's where you really get to try sound recording. This is like Young Film Academy summer camp, and it's such a new thing, and I feel like people it either goes one way or the other in someone's head. It's either like the coolest thing they've ever sort of discovered, or they're like, oh, no, I think I'm going to be like a camera person. Because I think when you watch a film, you're not necessarily thinking about sound, you just sort of experience it.
No.
So for you, what was the thing that made you go, oh, I want to go into sound? You know?
It was kind of a few things. I mean, in my own honest experience of going to film school in Bournemouth as a sound student, the majority of the time I was there, I did primarily steer my interest towards post-production sound because, of course, at the time, post-production sound seemed to me to be the more creatively fulfilling, which is something that I've come to find more in on-set sound. So once I'd finished university, which just happened to be in lockdown, of course, the what I began to wonder was exactly how I could make a career out of this kind of thing. And I didn't really have a lot of studio equipment at home for sound design, which is something that I think I wrongly told myself I really needed a lot of in order to start a career in the industry. So, but what I did have was a small amount of on-set sound equipment, literally just like a Tascam DR60 recorder and a secondhand Rode mic. And from then I just began to build myself as a freelancer on short films and various things like that. And it was in just being curious and deciding to learn about these things during lockdown that I started to really build my interest towards on-set sound, where I sort of eventually, I'd say at the end of 2021, tried to become a specialist in. And it's in trying to become a specialist in being an on-set sound recordist that I have found a lot of creative fulfillment in that role, because there are so many different scenarios you can find yourself in as a sound recordist, and there's 1,001 ways out of those scenarios. And finding these answers and all of these things on set does actually take a lot of creativity in terms of problem solving, which is something that I find really fulfilling.
Amazing. What sort of situations do you sort of find yourself in, or I wonder if you have any sort of like fun anecdotes of, I suppose there's lots of times where it's just like, oh yeah, no, cool, I know where I'm going to be, I know I can stand over here. But is it when you move indoors, is that where suddenly there might not be the space for you, or is it just noisy environments in general? Like what are the biggest obstacles that you're having to sort of problem solve around?
So when I'm working indoors, generally the main thing that you have to concern yourself with as a sound recordist is what things are in that room that are making noise. Generally things like traffic that could be a thing that you're thinking about. If, for example, you're filming in, let's say, an apartment on, Dalston High Street, which is something that could have an effect on the sound. And that is something that you might have to possibly liaison with a lighting team to see if they have any sort of flags and things to block out. I mean, really, the route to all of these solutions is collaborating with other departments. Could be art departments, seeing what things they have. But of course, sometimes when you do find these solutions, these sort of long-term solutions, sometimes, particularly when working in small rooms, a lot of these things. One thing that I've basically found is that collaboration is the way out of these things. And I think a good example that I had a few years ago in a short film, which was a short period film called Moisha that I filmed somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Ireland last March.
Nice. And that sounds cold.
And it was quite cold, and there are a lot of sheep. So there was a particular scene where the DOP was the shot that he needed was a handheld close-up of the main character during quite a particularly pivotal dialogue scene, and he, in order to achieve this close-up, his positioning was to be crouched, sort of 2 or 3 feet away from the actor, and employing a small amount of footwork to create sort of a handheld variation from take to take. And one of the things that I noticed during the rehearsals was that there was some kind of movement coming from his shoes, and immediately this thing was kind of spotted by a few of us, and one of the suggestions was that maybe it was the floorboards, or which is something that a few people argued, is there anything we can maybe even do about this? But in my experience of these locations and thinking about kind of equipment and crew wear, I believed it was the camera operator's shoes that was making this noise. So I asked the guy, for this next take, I know this is quite a strange request, but do you think you could maybe just for this setup, take off your shoes for us? And this man looked at me,
and he was like, Zach, are you into feet? Like,
he looked at me as if I was insane. But he took his shoes off, and alas, there were no issues after that.
Very good.
Yeah.
So, but of course, it's one of those things where you need to make sure that I like to make sure if I have to occasionally ask another department to do something, I always like to make sure that I'm not asking them to do anything that is changing the way they want to shoot their film or, deliver their portion of the film. So, of course, sometimes in certain locations, maybe it's a health and safety thing where someone can't take their shoes off. But you always want to think of everything you can and come up with every idea just to get those few millimeters. Because it is kind of, once everything's set up, you're kind of 90% there. But you always want to go for that 100% of what you're capable of getting from that scene. So I like to just work and collaborate with other crew members just to get those extra millimeters, that extra 10%.
Yeah. Do you sort of pre-anticipate what the sort of different problems might be in terms of like if you see that, we're meant to be filming in like an old creaky house, then feet is going to be a problem. Like how much prep goes into that, or is it always generally sort of an on your feet, trying to solve things?
Well, of course, I like to know as much about a location and a scenario as I can. And this is information that I will try and ask from the production directly. However, there are certain issues that you have the potential to have with any kind of location that I think having done this, having been on quite a few film sets now, there are issues with certain locations that you're always going to have with those locations. So, for example, I've done a few films. I've done a few films in takeaways, and when you're working in an environment like a kebab shop or a takeaway or even something like an off license, you're always going to have fridges and fans and all the like. So I was
rumbling tummies. Is that a bonus threat of a takeaway place? If you're like next to all the nice looking chicken wings,
yeah. There's that is one of those things when you do have sort of prop food on set that is just real food. The tummy's rumbling is something that I won't say who does it, but it is something that does happen more often than you might think.
Because I know sometimes if people are at a certain angle, like me as an editor, I'll often hear like heartbeats. Like that suddenly becomes like a thing sometimes for mics. But rumbling tummies genuinely was sort of like a joke, but I imagine it is.
Yeah,
it does crop up and stuff.
But
that's a huge problem for me in recording audiobooks. My stomach is always rumbling, and the engineer is always like, "I can hear your stomach." And I know that the few times as an actor where I've worn a body mic, you can sometimes hear my stomach on the body mic.
Yeah, because it might be placed up high, but if it's closer to somewhere like the diaphragm and the lungs, you might hear a tummy rumbling. But I can assure you the situation inside something like let's say a Chinese takeaway, you're going to have fridges. You're potentially, if there is cooking involved in the scene, you're obviously going to have all of your cooking, utensils and equipment happening. So, for example, I did this independent feature film called High Wire earlier this March. And that was a film which a good chunk of it takes place in a Chinese takeaway, and in the front foyer of this Chinese takeaway, where a lot of the dialogue takes place, there are several fridges nearby. And the issue I had with these fridges was that I needed them off, but if they were off, the light wouldn't be on. There's an LED light at the top of the door illuminating it. Yeah. And so initially I was told by the director and the producer that I couldn't have these fridges turned off because the lights would not be on. And so using the art of collaboration, I went up to the lighting department and asked them if they had any spare lights. So in the end, we managed to have these fridges off, of course with the assurance that nothing too perishable was inside them. So
yes.
there was, I believe there was
you've got to check with the owner, I suppose,
yeah,
don't you?
you have
you're not
to
gonna
have your locations department liaison with the owner to ask exactly what we can switch off and what we can't.
If there's ice in there, then you you flood the set.
If it's something like a freezer, perhaps you would have someone from an art department be standing next to this freezer and have them switch it off as soon as we roll camera, and as soon as we cut camera, they turn it back on.
Yeah.
So,
interesting.
But with these few drinks fridges in the foyer of this Chinese takeaway, we had them off, but I had the lighting department put lights in so that we could. So that everyone wins, really.
And would you say most of the challenges as a sound recordist are they right at the start of arriving in a new location, or are they generally spread throughout the shoot? Because I know when you're shooting stuff, you constantly end up like finding things in frame that you didn't want and stuff like that. But I wondered, like, once you have a sense of the environment, does it actually stay? Is it then just pretty chill and you can enjoy the sound recording once you've worked out the sound issues?
Generally, as a sound recordist, your two main obstacles for recording sound is the stylistic intention, where your camera is going to be, where your lights are, and then the other thing is the environment. And traditionally, the role as a sound recordist is the same in every film. It is our job to record the lines, the actors saying the script, and make sure that we produce this to the highest fidelity we can in a way where the actors are also able to get the best out of their performances. And so, of course, the two main obstacles is your shooting style, and your environment. And fortunately, the shooting style is something that you can always know about 99% of the time ahead of schedule, because you can obviously talk to your director, talk to your DP and ask, not even necessarily if they have a shot list, but perhaps, is there a certain kind of shooting style? Are there certain angles you think you're going to go for? And directors and DPs generally, especially when they're in the midst of pre-production where this is all they're thinking about, they're very, very very good at communicating these things to you, because they will say, this film is going to be a oneer on Steadicam, which is a piece of information that they really make sure we know, because they know that if we don't know, we could be in for a very tricky disaster. So it's all about knowing what kind of style they're going to shoot in. Quite often, if it's, it's how many cameras, if it's one, what kind of angles you're going to choose. And so all of that, you can use this information to anticipate your kind of mode of operations. And with lighting as well, if you're in some kind of interior building, they might tell you that a lot of the lighting is going to be top down. And so the top-down lighting is the scenario where booming is going to be some of the most surgical, because the last thing that a director wants to see on his monitor is a big long shadow being cast on the lead actor's face.
Right.
So you ask those things to anticipate from a camera and lighting perspective, but then also you do have the environment itself, which is something that as sound recordists, I think, is something that, at least in my experience in the independent world, I don't think something that we see enough of is sound representatives being brought on recce's. So the process of scouting locations is generally done from a visual perspective.
Visuals.
You generally, the two main people that you bring on a recce these days would be your DP to make sure that the location fulfills their aesthetic, the director making sure it fills their vision, so that they can read the script and see that location, and also the production designer to a certain extent, because they may have a certain style if you're doing a particular type of stylistic piece. And so I don't tend to be brought on a lot of these recce's, because I think that there is a belief that if there are any sound issues at a location, they would be wildly obvious to anyone on a recce. But quite often these things do run into issues, and as a sound recordist, the last thing you want is to arrive at a location and find out on the day that there is some kind of unavoidable sound issue that could have been preventable had I known earlier.
Yeah, that's so true. I literally just had a conversation with a friend of mine about a film that they had worked on, and they were saying whoever went on the location recce was not thinking about sound, because it turned out that the flat that they wanted to shoot in was right next to a train, and every 30 seconds the train was the subway, the tube was going past and making so much noise, and it was right on a high street, and so there was all this sound coming in through the windows. And so, I think that's such a good perspective, actually, that you want to think about bringing a sound person on a recce, because I also think even like interior spaces, how much echo are you going to get? Like how are you going to deaden sound if you need to do that? Yeah.
And quite often the one thing that producers don't tend to think about when they do recce's from a sound perspective is how much the exterior environment has the potential to change throughout the day.
Yes.
So if you're even if you're in a residential area that is, say, somewhere in Brixton off of the A road, you could have varying levels of traffic throughout the day, which from a sound perspective is going to cause continuity issues. So if with a sound person there, you can generally tackle all of this. So
and they can sort of clue up
that
the people.
That leads me to the question I wanted to ask, which is, like, you had mentioned this earlier as well. This, if you've got traffic in the background or you've got stuff outside the flat, you're shooting in a flat and you've got a lot of sound coming from outside the flat. And you had said that you used to work, or you kind of originally were studying sound in post-production. How much in terms of, like, when you think about, like, when you know that the sound is going to be designed later, like, do you as a sound recordist take care of getting Foley on site, or do you leave that to the post-production teams and they get their own Foley when they're building the soundscape of the film?
In a general sense, the role of an on-set production sound mixer or sound recordist, our primary goal is to get the dialogue, because the dialogue from the actors from a production perspective is going to be the most expensive thing to replace later should you have to. Whereas things like your Foley and your sound effects, firstly, they are fully capable of being done later because there are no exterior assets, or there are no assets required to capture these things. And also, it is the preference of post-production for things like Foley and single sound effects to be recorded in a controlled environment, which on a film shoot, you almost never have a controlled environment.
Yeah.
So, of course, there are occasionally times where, let's say, a director is really fascinated by a particular space that something has been filmed in and is interested in getting the most out of it. Quite often, a director will liaison with their sound designer about this and say, I would like certain things to be recorded in this space. And then that information is they talk about this with their sound designer. The sound designer will then propose the best thing, certain ideas of how to get the best out of this location. And then generally all of this is communicated to the on-set sound recordist. And then I will of course, discuss my professional perspective of it and see what we can do. So, because I've done a few short films, I did a short film a couple of months ago where it wasn't a dialogue heavy piece, but it was a film about a location. It was a film that took place in a flat, and there were several pieces of music throughout this film which the director wanted in this space. And so over the course of this shoot, we would play the music out loud on set and record a part of them so that they're re-recorded in this environment, which I realize one thing that I have just described there is it's actually there is a term that's been around for when was it around? It's been around since the 1970s, something proposed by Walter Murch called worldizing. And so some of the students,
I love Walter Murch.
Some of the students listening may know of the name Walter Murch. He wrote the book, I believe it's called In the Blink of an Eye.
Yeah,
And so,
it's like the book on editing.
it's
like,
the book
if
on
you're going to read
editing.
any book,
And
that's the
so
one.
Walter Murch is an editor and a sound designer, mostly known for his work on George Lucas's early work and Coppola's work. And he proposed the idea of worldizing, which is when you want to add reverb to something, but instead of using a digitized plugin, you literally bring your recording to the space and re-record it.
Yeah.
So there's a in the opening of The Godfather, there's a scene that takes place in a wedding, and there's a wedding band, and he had the clean track, of course, that was done in a studio by the band that was on set, but then he had that recording brought to the set, played out loud on speakers, and re-recorded so that you have a new recording, which is the piece of music, but it also has the character of the environment. And he would then use the two tracks, the clean and the wet track, the one in the environment, to basically create a sonic depth of field. So whenever the picture editor would be on the characters, he would bring the worldized track up, because the more reverb something has on it, the more dialogue is able to cut through it. And then when he cuts away to sort of B-roll shots of the wedding, he would then bring the main track back into the forefront. And so this is something that Walter Murch liaisoned with the on-set sound team about, to say, look, I have a piece of music and I would like to utilize the space of this environment. And through these discussions between post-production sound and on-set sound, they were able to get all of these additional recordings in said space within the shooting window.
That is so cool.
At first I thought you were talking about, essentially doing ADR equivalent or Foley, but you record it specifically in that location of the scene. But obviously that's expensive, right? And then you have to get the actors back in and stuff. The idea of just playing it out loud through a set of, I assume, really good speakers is really cool. Do you think that would work? Obviously, a band might have some speakers amplifying things, although actually it's a brass band, so they probably didn't. Do you think you can tell that it's coming from a speaker? I suppose you're just capturing the most reverby points, or the perspective that aligns with maybe where most of the scene's taking place?
I mean, as to denoting whether something's coming from speakers, that's generally down to making sure that your speaker technicians on the day are playing everything at the right level. So I imagine they would have done tests on set, playing the music out loud to a degree that it's not too loud where the speakers are compressing, and not too quiet where the music is too enveloped by the environment. And then they would record these things from a certain distance, enough that they have the music, but also the character around it.
Wow. That's so cool. I want to... My first thought is I want to do that on the next film. And then I know the budget will be like, yeah, if you want to pay me to go to that environment and play it out loud on the speaker. And then the producer will be like, yeah, no, we're not paying for that.
We're not paying for that.
It's definitely a very interesting area to explore. And for me,
I love it.
That's the kind of area where, for me, as a sound recordist, the more creative scenarios I get into is when you have to think about choosing where certain things are recorded.
Yeah.
So, for example, the film Highwire I did early this year, which was mostly filmed in a Chinese takeaway. Also, a lot of it was filmed in a circus tent. So later...
Very different locations.
Yeah, very, very different locations. The smallest and the largest, if you will. So in the edit, which was done, of course, in the subsequent months, there were certain lines of dialogue which the picture editor and the director wanted to add. So they would... It's something that is quite often done in TV, where when you cut away from someone, you can add extra lines in their reverse, so that you can add these lines in, and because you've cut away from them to the other character, you don't have to worry about your the lip syncing. So they gave me a list of lines which they wanted re-recorded, which from an ADR perspective can get quite expensive. So we all sort of suggested together that these extra lines be done during the shoot, which they asked me if it was possible in the first place. And so I sort of said, I'll take a look at how much there is to do. So, but in the end, I was actually very excited to get these during the shoot, because the thing about adding ADR and things like that is that the biggest problem with ADR is that, and the reason why a lot of people dislike it, is that you only notice bad ADR. And the main cause of bad ADR is when you can tell that it's being done in a completely separate space to your original location. So because we were reusing certain locations, the creative solution that I managed to figure out was that these extra lines that happen in certain scenes, we should re-record them within the same or as similar locations as we could. So of these sort of 6 days of reshoots that happened sort of 6 months down the line, we had access to another circus tent. And so all of the lines that needed to be added into the circus tent scenes, we re-recorded those lines in the circus tent. So that you have the same character and colorings of that location. And not only is it going to sound more similar to your original location, but it does help the sound team because they have a few less steps to do, and it just helps continuity. And finding these solutions was something that I really enjoyed, because it was one of the most creative experiences that I've had, because you're also working with the actors and thinking about, okay, with this line that they've added in, this actor's probably running or walking at a pace. And so while we were doing certain ADR lines, we would have the actors actually walking so that they'd be able to accentuate the lines in the same way.
Yeah.
So because I'm always ready for scenarios like that, I try and keep myself as creatively switched on as I can for a sound recordist, which is why I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, there's obviously, you mentioned the sound recordist and a sound mixer. I wondered if you could sort of break down what the different on-set roles are, because obviously I know on the smallest of productions, you might be a one-man team, but if you're on a massive scale production, how big can that team get, and what are those different roles?
Good question.
So in my experience, the word sound recordist is an extremely loose term, and even within the sound community, there is a certain lack of continuity on which terms are used. The accepted way that I have deduced to explain it to people is that when you have a sound department made of multiple people, let's say you have a 2-person sound department on a film, you have your boom operator, who is the one operating the boom. That's the easy one to explain. And then your sound mixer is the head of department, who is by the car or working out of a bag to mix and record everything. And when you're working with a department of multiple people, you'd have a boom operator, and the sound mixer is the person in charge running sort of everything. However, there are certain productions where, especially independent productions with small crews, where I am doing the mixing out of a bag with all your radio mics, but I'm also booming simultaneously. And the term sound recordist comes when you do have someone wearing a lot of hats as a sort of one-man band. So I generally, if I'm doing a short film or an independent feature film, the general accepted term is sound recordist, because that sort of encompasses everything that one person is doing, whereas mixer tends to be the name of a single role within a team of people. And so as far as all of the other roles go, there are terms that change depending on what country in, but generally after let's say your sound mixer in a team on a sort of a large scale feature film, you of course have your sound mixer, and then you have your boom operator. But I believe in the UK and I believe in Europe, the boom operator, the actual industry term is your first assistant sound, as opposed to your first assistant camera. So in America, they call them boom operators, but in the UK, they call them your first assistant sound. And depending on what kind of production you're working on, if it's something with multiple cameras, you might have 2 or 3 first assistant sounds. Maybe one of them is the key first. And then after that, you have your second assistant sound, or sometimes they're called sound utility. The second assistant sound generally is your sound department coordinator. So during a shoot, if there's, they'll keep up on the day-to-day things like timesheets and if there's a location move and there's liaisoning that needs to be done with other departments, your sound department coordinator, your second AS, will liaison with production on these things during the shoot day so that your mixer, the head of department, can just focus on mixing for the whole day. Of course, they would handle the business end of things on and offset, but the sound department coordinator is your logistics person during a shoot. And traditionally, the second assistant sound would also be doing a lot of radio mic work, depending on the size of your cast.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the person who would be going and putting the mics on the bodies of people, I presume.
Yeah, I do know that the first assistant sounds do a lot of this as well, because obviously at the start of the day, the radio micing is a lot of the legwork that needs to happen before you get onto set. So quite often your boom operators will do that as well. And then the second AS will also take part in radio miking, depending on, of course, the size of your cast, and perhaps maybe there are changeovers during the day with certain cast.
Is there a different skill set required for each of these different roles, or is it largely the same thing? And I know obviously you kind of probably need to be ready to do all of it if you're working on, say, like a small film. But do certain skills lend themselves better to particular roles within the sound department?
I mean, in terms of kind of the big stuff where you do have the teams of this size, I've only ever worked in those teams as a sound trainee, or some people say a third assistant sound. And generally the way that I've interpreted that kind of thing works is that once you've worked as a trainee for a while in a sound department like that, the natural progression is that you would then progress to being a second assistant sound, and once you've mastered all the skills of being a second assistant sound, then you graduate to being a first. So, and that's kind of the ladder that seems to be visible, at least in my experience. I am aware that there are some people who might start out being a first, learning all the skills on smaller productions, and then they might graduate on a path only being in that role. But sound is one of those things where there's kind of a thousand ways to slice your journey into it. But to my knowledge, there are a lot of skills that very much do bleed over into each other. I do know that on certain films, even the mixer will take part in radio miking as well, depending on their workflow.
What are the sort of soft skills required for that kind of role? Because obviously you are interfacing with so many different departments, and especially I always feel like the moment you're interfacing with actors, which I know sound recorders have to do a lot, then there is almost extra sensitivity, because that's where you get people of all different ages and stuff. Like, what makes a good sound recordist just from almost like a human perspective, you know?
For me, it's something that I've become conscious of as a sound recordist, and something that I've kind of carried through all the different roles of sound I've tried. The main thing for me has always been people skills, which is something that, I mean, there are so many different kinds of people skills you need on the set as a sound recordist. Firstly, there's of course the people skills required to, when you're miking up an actor, to make sure that they are engaged in the sort of optimal comfort experience that they can. So, for example, whenever I'm particularly at the beginning of a shoot, if I were to meet an actor I hadn't met before, one of the things that, and this is something that I sort of brought upon myself to do nowadays, is if I were to meet an actor on the first day, even though I know that I've got to put a microphone on this actor, and the actor knows that I've got to put a microphone on them, I will try to frame it as a question. So I will say, "Oh, hello, Scott. I'm going to be putting a microphone on you today. Is that okay with you?" And so by framing it as a question, it signals to the actor that my process has their best interest in mind. So especially when I'm working on, let's say, a student production with an actor who maybe hasn't worn a microphone before, I always try and gauge what's going to be the most comfortable experience for this actor. Yeah. And this is something that as a male sound person, if I'm working with a female actor, I will ask the female actor, based on what's going to make you more comfortable, would you prefer it if perhaps I handed you the microphone and I sort of told you a step-by-step guide of how I'd like you to have it on you, so that no one feels under any kind of pressure to be involved in what is kind of by nature quite an intimate experience. And so there are a certain sort of number of and kind of people skills that I've tried to develop for myself over the years, so that any actor can be given the most comfortable experience possible. Because if an actor is, doing quite an emotional, intimate scene that day, kind of an incredibly awkward miking experience has the negative potential to have an effect on their performance that day. And so within mind of what the actor wants, I always try to cater my experience so that anything I do doesn't have any negative effects on what they're trying to bring. And as an extension of this, I generally try and make my presence on set with actors and everyone kind of as peripheral as possible. So because that's kind of where it goes back to for me. Like many people, think that sound is an incredibly technical role, which it is. I mean, there's a 1,000 different pieces of equipment with 1,000 different buttons on them. But generally, I try not to. I don't really market myself to producers as a technician. I sort of say my goal there isn't necessarily to, put the mic in exposition and press record. I like to think of myself as I'm there to capture the performances, and any technical decision that I make is all in purpose of course, the director's vision, but also what experience can I provide the actors with that is going to give them as unobstructive an opportunity as possible for them to get the best out of their performances.
Yeah, that's brilliant because I think... Oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think thank you so much for saying that, because I think something that we tend to see sometimes with young people is that they're like, oh, I'm just the person who holds the boom. I'm just the person pushing the record button on the Zoom, and they don't see themselves as part of the storytelling. But the way that you framed it, you are 100% part of the storytelling. In fact, you're one of the most vital parts because you're actually capturing the storytelling. And if you're not doing your thing, then all the words they've said don't matter because we didn't actually get the audio recorded. And I think that that's such a... And obviously that those soft skills that you're talking about, I mean, I think we come to this pretty much every episode of the podcast that we record is like, it is really important for you to be technically capable, but probably as important and maybe more important are your abilities to work with other people and to figure out how to facilitate, as you said, a positive experience for everyone, yourself included, right? I mean, you could go in there and be really bullish and say, pull up your shirt, I'm putting your mic on, but that's not going to be fun for you either. It's gonna make everybody uncomfortable. So it's a really great thing to hear that you're very that it is a mindset, that you're talking about a mindset where you've decided that you understand your purpose within the cog, as a cog in this machine, and that is so. I think that's. I mean, I just think it's beautiful. Actually, I'm very glad to have heard you said that, because I think that can be really inspiring.
And I think going to your point about, I think one of the misconceptions of boom operating is that on paper it can be reduced to holding the microphone. But quite often it's what it's more about is anticipating what an actor's going to do. So if you're working with an actor who's got a particular energy in a scene, and they might be, making a lot of movement-based decisions during the take, as a boom operator, it is very much to your advantage to watch the rehearsals and study the actor to know their tendencies, so that during a take, if you're right over the top of them and you're holding a specific position, it's incredibly useful to know that that actor is capable of making a sudden movement in a certain direction. And there is kind of a sort of dance going on where
I was just going to say it's like a dance.
An actor moves, you moves. And it's one of those things where the more in tune that a boom operator is with an actor's performance, the better. That's the kind of the rawest example of capturing a performance. It is making sure that everything is in position at the right time.
When you talk about like the position of the microphone and stuff, I know obviously, even moving it a bit can change what you're capturing so much. How do you go about learning where you should be putting the microphone and sort of the different placements of like lapels, the microphones that sort of clip on and attach to people? Do you listen to like interviews with master sound recordists, or is this all stuff from film school, or does most of it all come from experience and just you end up with just a catalogue in your own mind of all these different scenarios of trial and error? Like, how do you build that understanding?
There definitely are resources out there which are incredibly informative on things like technique and microphone choice. But the best way to learn really is trial and error. It's, try different microphones in different rooms. And the radio miking is a big thing because a lot of radio mic technicians do have very specific kinds of practices that work for them and certain mounts they prefer. But the general thing with microphone choice is more particularly with boom microphones is thinking about what kind of space that you are filming in and what kind of effect that the character of that space is going to have on your microphone. For example, if you're recording outside on a road where there's a lot of background noise which has the potential of overpowering the dialogue, has the potential of compromising the dialogue should you be pointed in the wrong direction, you want as focused a microphone as you can so that you can point it at the actor and have the dialogue cut through, because if you're using a shotgun microphone, because of the length of the barrel, the way the pickup pattern reacts to it is that it sort of rejects everything that's off to the side. And so generally the longer your microphone is, the more focused it is. Your microphone choosing a microphone is sort of like choosing a lens in.
I was going to say it was like choosing a golf club. I don't even know that much about golf, but I was thinking you've got the bigger ones for the longer shots. Yeah.
And then
how big is that arsenal of microphones that you have? Like, you mentioned sort of which one's right for the moment. I'm just suddenly thought, how many are in your closet?
I have about, as far as on a job, I have about 2 or 3. So I have a shotgun microphone. Sensible. I have a shotgun microphone for outdoors, and then for indoors I have what you would call a cardioid microphone, which is a microphone where the sensor is a lot shorter. So this is for maybe some of the technical students, your MKH50, which is a popular microphone by Sennheiser. And the shorter cardioid microphones, they work better indoors because the cardioid microphones have a much wider pickup pattern. They are much better at capturing a natural representation of the space that you're shooting in.
Yeah.
So, because one of the issues with shotgun microphones is that they because they are focused on picking up everything that's in front of them, quite often they also have a bit of prominence directly behind the microphone. So if you use a shotgun microphone or any kind of rifle or too long of a microphone in a small space, you will get kind of like a zingy reverb because you're hearing more of the reverberance bounce around the room. And because you don't need that kind of focus in a controlled interior space, you would use a cardioid microphone because it has a much more natural sound, and of course it's going to give you a more accurate representation of the space. But sometimes
I record my audiobooks on a cardioid microphone.
Yeah,
because you're trying to get that sense of like the way that the shape of the sound is being recorded. Yeah.
And of course, sometimes you might have to use some kind of short shotgun indoors if you're doing a particularly wide shot. But then also there's, you've always got radio mics as well, because they're generally there for when the boom doesn't work, but you may need them at all times.
Yeah. That's amazing. So just before, we're almost out of time, so we're going to move on to our last couple of questions. But I wondered, just before we do that, if you were speaking to like a young person that had a real sort of inclination towards sound and really sort of wanted to explore it. Obviously, a lot of people, one of the reasons they come to our courses is to meet other people that really share the passion of filmmaking. But often they haven't met those people yet. So they might not have a film to be the sound recordist on. So what would you do? Obviously, they could get a microphone. What would you suggest that they record to practice and develop that skill if maybe they don't have a film that they can work on?
You mean equipment wise or opportunity wise?
Opportunity wise, I suppose. Yeah, like could they be recording like radio plays? Is that useful if you do that in like an environment? Like how best can you practice if you're not on set, or is it just one of those things that you need to get that experience in film school first?
I don't think you necessarily need film school outright to get these experiences. Although one of the benefits of going to a film school is that you do have quite unrestricted access to all of this equipment. So, for example, when I studied at Arts University Bournemouth for 3 years, I used every opportunity of the availability of that equipment to book it out on side projects to really explore and turn these machines inside out and figure out how they worked, or even perhaps during a project to take the kit home and explore it. It's all about using as much opportunities as you can to get hold of these equipment. And you don't even need to necessarily get hold of the best equipment in the world, because the thing about all sound recorders is that the fundamental nature of all these machines are the same. Yeah. So of course, like at the consumer end of the market, you do have sort of the more consumer level Tascam recorders and Zoom recorders, and really those kind of things are all you need to start building a sound kit. Because as soon as you learn the fundamental techniques of inputs, gain staging, phantom power, if you can get hold of these recorders who might go for £50 on eBay, if you can get hold of those and start recording and using them to get an understanding of the fundamentals, all of that knowledge is extremely capable of being carried over and interpreted on your sort of larger machines like your Mix Pre's, your Sound Devices 6 series. So the best way to learn sound is to just go out and do as much of it as you can, because there's only so much literature you can read about an extremely practical part of the industry.
Yes, of course.
Amazing. Thanks, Zak. Last two questions. What were you doing in your teenage years that turned out to be helpful for what you do now? And then what advice would you give to that teenage self now, looking back?
I'd say I would honestly say activity. Do as much of it as you can. So, for example, when I was in sixth form, just doing my A levels, there was I like the idea of just making short films by myself, and I tried to challenge myself to make a short film with sort of one cast and one crew. And I made this short film with a friend with just filmed it on my iPhone and used almost no equipment, not for the purposes at all of trying to make a good film, but making something for the pure goal of having more knowledge about the process by the end of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that young filmmakers should be interested in making films and be more engaged with the process than the actual final product. So I think it's just go out and start doing it. Like, there's cameras everywhere these days, and you don't necessarily need like proper microphones to make a film, because you can just you can use if you have the right costume, you can just use the voice notes app to put your phone in someone's pocket, and you maybe have the fundamentals of a radio mic there, and just go out and make films and figure out what you did right and what you did wrong.
People massively underestimate how good those microphones are.
Yeah.
I think it's often because by the time you hear someone on the phone, you think the microphone's bad because you're hearing that sort of condensed audio that's either going over Wi-Fi or is going straight down the phone line. But the reality is, it's actually a really, really good microphone and fit for purpose. It works for a lot of situations.
For those type of scaled projects.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Zak, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing the knowledge of sound recording finally with our audience. So
yeah, I feel completely enlightened, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should be a sound recordist. Maybe I need to learn about it, because I do a lot of audiobooks, so I am in the audio world, but I'm a performer in the audio world, and I'm feeling like now suddenly I really should know more about the technical stuff. So
I mean, sound is one of those things that it exists in so many different industries, that there's so many vast corners of technical knowledge and environmental knowledge that it's I'm thinking that in 20 years, if hopefully I'm still doing this, I'm going to always consider myself to continue to be a student of the game, because there's always so much room for improvement with sound and development.
Is there a book you'd recommend? I know we mentioned In the Blink of an Eye by Walter Murk. I wondered if there was an equivalent for sound that you'd read that you thought that was particularly useful. I know there's a sound design book that's quite good, but I'm
not sure. I don't know if... I mean, a lot of my knowledge of Walter Murk, a lot of it, I'll admit, doesn't extend very much past In the Blink of an Eye. Although I do believe there is a lot of sound design stuff in there, because Walter Murk is famously a sound designer and an editor. But
I think he's the only person to have won an Oscar for both. Not on the same film, but
no,
he's the only guy.
He won both for The English Patient.
Oh, for The English, he was. Because I thought he won both for The Conversations, but then I looked it up and he won it for the sound design, but not editing. I don't think he actually edited that film.
For The English Patient, he's the only man to win each Oscar for the same film. But I can, as far as the learning resources that I can recommend, I'll read the list of the sort of several YouTube channels that I mostly studied during lockdown. Because a lot of where my initial technical knowledge of onset sound came from was during lockdown. I basically just sat down and watched YouTube tutorials for 12 hours a day for 6 weeks. And you can learn some stuff that way if you watch enough of them.
Yeah.
So the channels that I would recommend is there's Matt from Sound Rolling, who has a lot of good resources. Ursa Straps, who is a retailer who also does a lot of behind the scenes content. They have a lot of great material about radio miking. There is Curtis Judd, who is an American sound recordist who he posts a lot of theory videos, but he also does a lot of videos about what kind of microphones do I need? What kind of microphone should I use? And he does a lot of side-by-sides. He does a lot of product recommendations of varying different budget levels. And so he's someone who I definitely recommend if you're looking to study different kinds of budgeted microphones. And then Deity Microphones, who is also a retailer. They have a lot of great behind the scenes content of sort of the fundamentals of what a boom operator does and all of these kind of scenarios you're likely to run into on a film set. And they're a very, very good resource for learning these sorts of things.
Superb.
Yeah.
Amazing. Zach, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And we hope to speak to you again soon.
Pleasure, guys.
Thank you.
That was great. I loved
Oh my gosh.
hearing about sound.
That was so enlightening. I feel like I really do think I was so impressed by his ability to demonstrate. First of all, I mean, you want to talk about collaboration. Like basically every bit of his role is collaborative. You know, you can't. Well, obviously, you can't be a sound recordist in a vacuum. What are you going to record? Nothing. There's no sound in a vacuum. So it is. But it was just. I think it made me feel very inspired, honestly, about the idea of making a film collaboratively. You know, remembering that there are so many people that it takes to make a film and look good and sound good and be good. And you might be thinking to yourself, you know, I know that in the context of our courses, sometimes perhaps kids are like, I don't want to be just quote unquote, just the sound recorder. But God, that's so important. That's, you know.
I genuinely, next time I teach, I want to sort of use his wording of like how sound recording is about capturing the performance.
The performance, that was such a beautiful way to phrase it. Yeah, you know? I agree.
Because I think it's easy to dismiss it when you're not looking through a lens, when images are what you associate with cinema, when actually that's only 50% of the experience, and it's so important, and how you capture the emotion is really key.
And he did mention that. I thought perhaps you should define it, because we forgot to when he mentioned it, but he talked a bit about ADR, which I actually can't even remember now what ADR
additional
stands
dialogue
for.
Recording.
That's what I thought. But I was like, is the R recording? Yeah. And so, and even if you think I've never heard of ADR, I don't know what it is, you are definitely familiar with it, because we have all seen movies and TV shows that have bad ADR. You know it's bad because you think suddenly the sound is completely different and that person sounds like they recorded that somewhere else. And it's because they did. And so thinking about those things, I think, is just, it's so impactful in a way that... And actually, I think the important thing is that it's really impactful, and we're not aware of it often because sound recordists do such a good job at their job. Yeah,
100%. 100%. We have a question this week. This is from Ahmed, who's 18. Ahmed wonders, when should I record background sound for scenes? Which I think is sort of referring to that, like room tone, ambient, sort of whatever sounds that you need, which... And I think there's sort of two ways of interpreting the question. One is, when should I do it? It's almost like, at 12 o'clock. That sounds good. But I think the other part of the question is sort of, in what environments is that important, right? Do you want to jump on this first?
Or at what stage of the process as well? You know, I think, you know, learning from Zach just then, you know, it is about... and really, it'd be great if we could talk to somebody who now works in sound in post, because, you know, really much of what you do to layer in the soundscape of a film, you're going to do at a later date. You know, on set, your priority should be recording the dialogue, because that's what you can't get again. Or you, I mean, obviously, if it's your friend, you could get it again, but it's about the environment in which you get it. Like we were just speaking about, ADR compared to, you know, sound that's recorded on set is very different. And so I think in terms of the background sound, you know, it's maybe perhaps getting some wild track when you're on set that you can get, you know, while nobody is speaking. But also thinking about getting it at another time, creating that and layering that in post, rather than thinking about it when you have enough to worry about on set.
100%. But yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, just, you know, you should be focusing on that dialogue. It's always good to get room tone, and there's nothing, and this is where the collaboration comes in as well. Politely remind your producers, your assistant director actually is who you really want to speak to, and just say, hey, oh my God, my microphone just collapsed, guys. I've been wrestling with it all day. You know, you want to speak to the AD and say, hey, I need quiet on set for 2 minutes whilst I record room tone. The AD is fully clued up that this is a thing and this is what needs to happen. You know, it's not going to reach deaf ears. There might be a situation where it's like, we don't have time.
Right.
Which is wrong. They should never say that. It will occasionally happen. And if so, well, post-production will just find some new ambience. But it's never quite the same as having a nice, clean audio track that is going to blend seamlessly with the boom recordings of the environment. So asking for that just before you end a scene, or it might be just before you break for lunch at a convenient point. The time you don't want to do it is midway through a scene, obviously, and midway through setting up lights, like because you're going to hold people up. Whereas just before pack down is a really lovely time. And I would say genuinely, just every scene get some room tone.
Yeah.
If a scene moves from one room to another, well, technically, obviously, that's a different scene on paper, but it might be recorded as one thing. So whether you want to get a bit of each space would be really important as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us, guys. We love doing these and sharing this other people's knowledge really with you. So we hope that this is enlightening. The lovely thing I want to take away from this is filmmaking is like a band, you know. And I say this because I know how many students, often some of them will be like, sound recorder is not for me. And other times students are like, I love this. But that's so cool. There is going to be someone out there that you can collaborate with that is as passionate about their thing as you are about the element of filmmaking that you are. So you have so much in common, even if it seems like you have different things in common, but you're all focused on telling stories and making movies. So find those people that are just as passionate as you, that complement you because they have interests that complement yours.
Yeah. Terrific.
Well, so long.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.